Jewish people are not just a religion, and this is something that's like really tricky to explain.
What did they tell you? Like, why don't people like you?
We're considered an ethnic group, and that's why anti-Semitism is actually like a racial, it's like a kind of a racism in a way. That's how it was conceived of by the Nazis, etc.
But my daughter lives in White Plains and happened to have been in Israel on October 7th. She is a changed person. She is so strident, pro-Israeli, that I can't have a normal conversation about maybe even a two-state solution.
The stereotype that you guys hear out there about Judaism that should be solved by now.
Yeah, that all Jewish people are wealthy.
Do you know how many times in my life I've been asked, do you celebrate Thanksgiving?
And he thinks that that Israel has never had a better American friend president than Biden, which I really would not have expected him to say.
Would you go to Israel right now? Politics and the Jewish faith certainly mixed into a lot of things because of what happened in October, but then Josh Shapiro and putting his faith out in front. A lot of people are talking about this right now.
I think it was important for us to find people in the Jewish community to kind of give us their perspective on what they thought on all of this.
And it's not always the same perspective, which is why we need to go off the air, and we're doing it right now at Bethel Temple. Thanks for being here, everybody. We're going to start with something that's controversial, and I hope you can be as honest as possible. What is the best Jewish food? Go.
Blintzes.
Okay, very good. What do you say?
A good big ol' oxen schmear.
Just going to go
Gotta stand
traditional.
by it.
All right. What do you
I'm
say?
gonna go with pastrami on rye.
What do you got?
Anything at Mr. Deli.
Oh, okay. You're going to keep it simple. Evan, you got a favorite?
No, listen, lox and bagel's pretty good because I don't like it in any other capacity unless that's together.
Okay, I'm going
really weird.
No, I'm going with kugel.
Okay,
Kugel.
Okay, going away.
Then people get all specific. You got raisins. You going with this
right,
or not?
Yeah. Savory or
Potato.
sweet.
I think
Yeah.
I think sweet. I think sweet is the way to go. Yeah. Okay. So all right. So we're all in good shape. We got that out there. Now let's talk about the easy stuff.
That's the tough stuff.
Politics, right? Here's the deal. We got you all here because we want to get the perspective of Jewish voters right now, people in the community, and they're not all the same, all right? And we're going to get to some places with this. But I want to start with you. You're the rabbi here. How much does politics come up? Do people talk about it? Do they not talk about it? Kind of where are we right now?
I would say we definitely talk about issues, but as a 501c3, I certainly from the pulpit don't talk about politics per se, nothing about policy, nothing about candidates, but we do talk about issues. We will talk about abortion rights. We might, we certainly talk about Israel and what's going on there. So we talk about issues, not as much politics, although lately at our, what we call kiddush after services, where we sit around and have lunch, a little bit's bubbling up.
Give me some themes. What are people talking about?
I think everyone's focused on the election, obviously.
Yeah.
And I think that's only going to continue to increase over the course of the fall. I mean, the summer gets a little bit quiet here. Maybe fewer people are here during the summer, but people are really starting to focus on the election.
Is there a consensus, or is there a lot of talk about which way to go on this?
I think
Just from what you're hearing.
Well, I think people, and maybe this is an unfortunate tendency of some of the polarization, is that people are tending to segment themselves into the kinds of conversations that the rabbi talked about. So maybe at the lunch, the kiddush lunch after a service, you might find people who are supporting a particular candidate sitting together at one table and other people sitting at another table. So it's tended maybe to polarize a little bit.
All right, what's going on this side of the room?
Well, listen, like in your opinion, how much does a candidate's faith kind of play into where you would vote in November? Does it matter, or is it you kind of just taking different things into consideration?
Now, candidate's faith means nothing to me. What means something to me is what the candidate has to say about other faiths and their acceptance, rejection, adherence, and understanding of other religions. That's going to be a determinant of my vote.
What do you mean by understanding of those religions?
That they accept explanations from others and that they understand what those explanations are and that they can then convey a message which is going to either resonate with the voter or in some cases, unfortunately, not resonate as a voter.
It was really striking to me the other day when Josh Shapiro spoke at the rally in Philadelphia that he made such a point of referencing his faith. And I think that sort of brought something home for me that, at least in the Democratic Party, which is the party that I'm affiliated with, that's not been a subject, it seems, that Democratic candidates have been comfortable bringing up. And I think maybe Josh has set a standard, and maybe you'll see more Democratic politicians talking about their faith as something that not necessarily dictates their views on a specific issue, but sort of informs their values and the way they look at the world, and maybe helps to shape some of their policy decisions.
I would just also add to that for me too, a candidate expressing, sentiments about their faith, it doesn't put me off at all. In fact, I think sometimes makes me value their opinion as being grounded in a kind of a tradition. And yet, I would also say that when there have been candidates on the ballot in Pennsylvania in recent elections that espouse supremacist ideas like white Christian nationalism, like that, the Christian nationalism does seem like a problem, and that is where faith, I think, crosses a line into potentially being problematic for minority faiths especially.
I don't know if you agree with this, but I feel like we're getting away from different parts of our faith, no matter what our denomination are. Why do you think that is? Why do you think people are afraid, especially people in power, political power, they getting away from religion and not talking about it, or not being as devout as a Shapiro is? Like, what do you think that's about?
Well, certainly, the United States has been secularizing for years, and across faiths, people are seeing lower affiliation rates. And that also has to do with just social trends, though, too. Like, people used to have to show up at church or even at synagogue or mosque to have social cachet, to have connections where they would get jobs. And that's just not true anymore. You're more likely to get social connections through sitting in a cafe, maybe not more likely, but people see that as important as getting connected through the synagogue. Now, I think those of us who do come here do find very valuable social connections here, and even professional ones sometimes, but people don't value it in the same way as it used to be a standard of society.
Let's stay on the Josh Shapiro angle for a second here. You talk to the political insiders, which we do all the time, and they think that his faith was a determining factor in him being chosen for vice president. What do you think of that? Let's start over here.
I have a newfound theory about that this morning.
Let's do it.
As a consequence of having read the Washington Post this morning. Okay. I feel that Kamala Harris went with Governor Walz to shore up the vote in the state of Michigan. I felt that she concluded, or her folks concluded, that we're going to be okay in Pennsylvania regardless. We really are going to lose 50 to 75,000 votes in Michigan, certainly if we choose Shapiro.
Because he's Jewish.
But we can grab those 50 or 75,000 votes if we go with a Midwesterner who's safe in their eyes. So I really think that they were looking more at Wisconsin and Michigan than they were about Pennsylvania.
So how do you feel about that? If that's true, I mean, it's an analysis, but if that's the truth, that means his faith was a direct reason why he wasn't chosen.
I think certainly his faith had a lot to do with why he wasn't chosen. And I don't find that to be completely detrimental to the candidate, to Vice President Harris either.
It's politics. I mean, no, that's part of the game.
But do you think this country is ready for a Jewish president, Jewish vice president? Because he's made it pretty high. Do you think we're at that point where we can have a Jewish president of the United States of America?
Well, we almost had one. In 2000, Joe Lieberman was a
few chads away from being vice president.
Right. I mean, they won the popular vote, and
Yep.
Joe Lieberman was a very observant Orthodox Jew. I mean, he would not engage in certain activities on the Sabbath or Jewish holidays.
I got a broader question. This is kind of yes or no, all right? Do you think in any other cycle in the last 20 years besides this one, Josh Shapiro would have had a better chance of being chosen than he did this time because of what is happening in Israel? Just a yes or no over here.
No, I don't think it would have made a difference.
No difference?
I think it does make a difference.
Yes?
I say no because of the Joe Lieberman example.
Okay. But you don't think it's...
I want
okay, go
to be
ahead.
clear about what we're saying. Yes, I think that it would have been more difficult this time for him to be chosen than in the Joe Lieberman cycle. You think it wouldn't have been more difficult this time?
I think a complicating factor is what's going on in Israel and Gaza. I certainly think that complicated the decision, and the timing of having to make the decision in August of 2024 is a complicating factor. But as a society in general, looking only through the lens of the United States of America, I think we're in the same position as we might have been 20 years ago.
How do you feel, I think you touched on this a little bit before, when someone like a politician is going to not only admit their faith, but talk about their faith? Because that is turning off some people, like you said. Now, Christian nationalism is kind of a different level of this, but if someone says they are a Muslim or a Christian or of the Jewish faith, that by definition is saying I'm not like other people, right? So is it dicey to put yourself out there as this, and then you have to cover it with, but I still respect everybody, but this is where I'm at? Do you understand what I'm trying to say there?
Yeah.
If you said nothing, you're probably better off in terms of with everybody, but if you're being true to yourself, maybe you got to say it.
Yeah, I think everybody has to have an identity, and politicians do well to define themselves in a particular way, and I think if you define yourself by your faith by saying, these are the values that I derive from my faith and I can apply them to politics in this way, I don't think that stands against you.
It's calculus. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm in a similar place to where Mike is. I'm very comfortable with people talking about their faith as long as they're not trying to impose their faith or to say my religious beliefs dictate that I engage with public policy in a certain way. That gives me a very uncomfortable
But I think a lot of people
feeling.
think that's what Shapiro would do as vice president, is he would have his faith and his conviction with Israel and make decisions based on that. Versus just a politician making decisions. I mean, that is how it's been portrayed in some circles, is it not?
Yeah, I mean, they are. I think it is being calculated to be portrayed that way by some. Yeah.
Is that fair though?
Look, I think we went through this back in the 1960 election with JFK.
Wow, that's strong stuff.
We went through this before, and when they thought JFK was going to answer to the Pope before he answered.
Right, and he had to give a speech to a group of Protestant ministers in 1960 saying the Pope is not going to dictate my public policy. Yes, I'm a Catholic. I go to church. I believe in the tenets of the church, but I'm going to govern. I'm going to govern for all Americans, and I think that's what I would expect from and hope.
Yeah, when you rather someone have something to hang on to, have a faith, something to believe in, as opposed to, as opposed to just being letting everybody decide what I am.
I'm glad you just said that, because my feeling is if you're sincere in your beliefs and you have a tradition of attending whatever denomination or whatever church or synagogue you attend, that to me is more refreshing and fulfilling and encouraging than the person who would march across the block from the White House with a Bible in his or her hand and proclaim his or her religiosity, when that person doesn't sincerely believe in any religion.
Well, and the key is, we know who you're talking about. But the key here is you're saying it's a character trait if you're grounded in something beyond yourself, and that's what religion is, right? And yes, there's big variances in religions, but at the core, it's beyond yourself. It's treating others well. It is, having someone else to account to beyond your own self.
So there's something that feels really important to me, though, to define in this conversation, which is that Jewish people are not just a religion, and this is something that's really tricky to explain, I think, in non-Jewish spheres, right? Jewish people are in a way an ethnic group, right, because of the traditional in-marriage, and within our ethnic group there are many different races and ethnicities. You can have Jews of all colors and all, nationalities, but we're considered an ethnic group, and that's why anti-Semitism is actually a racial, it's a kind of a racism in a way. That's how it was conceived of by the Nazis, etc., right? And then there's also the kind of national political identity in terms of affiliation with Israel, right? So you could have, there are these are really complicating factors in terms of how you look at Jews, right? So when you said before, oh, Josh Shapiro is going to be expected to align with Israel because of his religion, I feel like, has to be separated from how people are seeing him as affiliated with Israel, which is a sort of a nationalist identity, versus the kind of the racial, like the reason that I think that it's hard for a Jew to get elected is actually what a friend of mine who's a black pastor, Reverend Earl Harris, said, like, are you kidding me? They're not going to pick Shapiro, a black and a Jew together? Like, come on. And that's not about his faith, right? That's about anti-Semitism as a racial category. So I think that there's historically, right. So I think that there's something subtle here to kind of piece apart in terms of discrimination against Jewish people, whether it's like, oh, your religion says something different than my religion says, or is it like an ethnic racial group, or is it a group that's, has affiliation with a country outside. It's just, there's a lot of layers.
Yes.
Okay, and that's why we're here. We're gonna actually get into some of those layers right now, okay?
Okay.
What is the stereotype, I'm gonna ask everybody, the stereotype that you guys hear out there about Judaism that should be solved by now, that you thought was solved, that's not, that needs to be cleared up because it's just wrong, but it's just pervasive after all these years and after all this time, it just hangs there, whether it's in your own life or you just see it said too much. I mean, are you ready for that? What do you think?
Yeah, that all Jewish people are wealthy.
Yeah.
There are many, many Jews who are poor
Of course.
and who are in need of assistance from the community. We have an organization here within the Harrisburg Jewish community called the Jewish Family Service, which has a food bank and food assistance programs for people who are hungry, that has a free loan program for people who need small amounts of money to tide them over in periods of a financial shortage. So that's the reality within the Jewish community.
Do you know how many times in my life I've been asked, probably less than a dozen, but probably somewhere between a half a dozen to a dozen times, do you celebrate Thanksgiving? And
I've never. That is a good one.
and it started probably from the time I was in elementary school, continuing through college, and even professionally. And that in itself is, they're recognizing that I'm a Jewish American, or maybe a Jewish person, maybe not so much an American, and it's an American holiday, but the Jewish people celebrate American holidays. We don't celebrate Christmas, we don't celebrate Easter, but there's nothing religious that I know of about Thanksgiving, but yet I've been asked that question, I won't say time and again, several times.
Enough times that you said again, really?
Do you think the average person could pick a Jewish person out of a lineup?
They would think they could.
Yeah.
Right? Because I think about that sometimes when people have like opinions on a certain people. Do you think if you lined up, you know what I mean?
Without the yarmulke.
Without the yarmulke, and you lined up Jewish people of all different places and countries, do you think they could pick them out of a lineup?
I got a 5- and 7-year-old in the Jewish day school in town, and they are confident that every single kid in person they run into is Jewish. They are certain of it. And you know what? It's cool. It's a different way than I brought up. I went to public school growing up, and it depends on the person. Again, they grow up thinking that they see everyone as that, and it depends. But as far as to answer your question, the biggest stereotype that we would kind of push back against, it's not a stereotype that's unique to Jews, but the fact that we're not a monolith at all.
I've always marveled when I lived in Los Angeles, and I see how devout you guys in your faith, and how you, despite being attacked from different people and dealing with anti-Semitism, that you guys are still proud in your faith and you still walk the streets proud in your faith. Do you ever get nervous? Do you feel any fear? How do you navigate that? You know what I mean? As a Jewish person, you know what I mean? Is it your faith that lets you do that? Or
Well, and how much of it is there? That's what I want to get to right now. How much is there right now, and maybe compared to other parts of your life?
Growing up, and Harvey and I are Harrisburgers, we have always been a minority, but yet professionally and socially, it was subtle, more than in your face, blatant. What we've seen in the last 9 months since October 7 is a little bit more in your face, and I've not been confronted by that, but then I haven't traveled too far from Harrisburg. I haven't been in Manhattan. I haven't been in
Do you have friends that have gone through
UCLA.
something?
Excuse me?
Any friends or colleagues that have gone through
Well,
it?
my daughter lives in White Plains and happened to have been in Israel on October 7th, where we were supposed to meet her on October 13th. She couldn't get home. She is a changed person from since then. She is so strident, pro-Israeli, that I can't have a normal conversation about maybe even a two-state solution, or she's now over the edge that they are intent on destroying us as a people. And that may change. She may heal. She may I don't want to say recover, but she may change from that. But as of today, she's strident.
Generationally, do you think that's something we're going to see? That's a game changer in such a way that you are going to see a number of people, whether they were there or not, move in that direction?
I think everybody's going to be affected differently by those events. But I wanted to respond to Evan's question because I think for many of us, something really significant changed in October of 2018 with the shootings in Pittsburgh.
Right.
You know, 200 miles from here.
Yeah.
And we, as a community, of course, have had to dramatically raise our level of security consciousness, but at the same time, for me, it's sort of reinforced my desire to be a part of this community. So I'm here almost every Saturday, and we have a security guard, but I feel absolutely no fear walking in here on a Saturday. And I hope that people are not staying home saying, I'm nervous about going to services because maybe I'm going to feel like I'm some kind of a target. Because I think if you do that, then the people who hate us have won, because they've made us fearful, because we're hiding from being out in society. And I think the best way to combat that is to live in an openly Jewish manner, to feel comfortable, to be here and actually show up.
I agree. Yeah, I agree but I agree with that we shouldn't be afraid. But I did hear a couple of people after October 7th didn't come to synagogue for a couple of weeks,
Right.
at least, if not a few months, because they were afraid of subsequent attacks. And
Are they back now?
Yeah. But I think that it's different. I think Jewish people, especially those who are sort of part of the secular mainstream, can blend in pretty well in public. So I wouldn't say I feel weird walking around as a Jew. I feel like a white person. But when you're in a Jewish identified space, I do right away I start looking around. I start wondering, who's allowed in here or who isn't. And definitely the hackles have been raised. I heard that, unfortunately in synagogues and administrations, we have to have a lot of conversations about what kind of security we have for different events. And in, I've heard that in Christian spaces, the question sometimes, maybe not anymore, but it used to be do we lock the door or not? Do we let people come in overnight, right? It's we're just nowhere near that.
I'm curious. I've always wanted to ask this. Where do you, fundamentally, where do you think the origins of anti-Semitism? We could everyone quickly goes to Nazis and stuff like that. But no, I'm serious. It blows my mind, honestly. It's hard to form the question. Where, in your opinion, with all you've seen, where you've raised your parents, what did they tell you? Why don't people like you? You know what I mean? Because I hear different things from people that are Jewish.
In terms of the origin, it's called the oldest hatred in the world. It goes
it has to
back
be.
to the Bible.
That's what
since there has been an Israelite or Jewish people.
But everyone that talks to me don't go to church, so it drives me crazy that they talk to me about the Bible and God. But y'all don't go to church. Where do you where does that come from? In your opinion, honestly.
But it's a lot of different perspectives, right? The same way I was saying, there are people who feel animosity towards Jews because of Israel, but that's a kind of a nationalist issue. There are people who feel that Jews are a different race, and there's a racism, and there's a people who dislike our religious beliefs. So that was kind of like the Crusades. They thought we were, used children's blood in our matzah, whatever. Like all these different levels can attract animosity for different reasons, unfortunately. But it's the oldest hatred in the world. Why it exists today, I mean, it's always changing, I think. It's
Remember how you
always
learned
different.
about it?
How were you taught about this?
I don't remember consciously being taught.
Okay.
I had some experiences in childhood where
So your parents never pulled you to the side? Like my mother and father was like, "Yo, listen, Evan, you black. Just remember you black." It's like one of those things, like looking into my eyes, like you're a black man in America, and then they sent me on my way. I'm like, what does that mean?
Yeah. No, I would hear things like, "You're Jewish. You should be proud to be Jewish. You should participate in the Jewish world. You should go to services. You should learn. You should study."
And at the same time here, though, there was the country club that allowed Jews in the country
Yeah,
club.
well,
that didn't
that's
allow
what
Right.
I said. Subtly growing up, there was always subtle. You didn't go there. My family experience, we were going to move because my sister was becoming a teenager. We were told by more than one realtor, well, you can't look in Camp Hill. This was 1962. You can't consider, so basically, if you want to go to where there's going to be a Jewish community, you're uptown Harrisburg, which we moved into uptown Harrisburg in 1962, and which is where we are today and up to Linglestown Road.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was true as we were growing up, but that's changing now. It's
And that was the subtle social.
right.
No, we were never told that you're different than somebody else and that you have to.
Really?
But we were told that you're going to be educated as a Jew. You're going to be bar mitzvahed. You're going to attend synagogue and Hebrew school.
The tradition will
much
stay.
to our chagrin.
Yep. Right. Especially at that age, I'm sure.
It interfered with some baseball games.
A lot of games on
Always
the weekend. Here's something. When you're watching the coverage of the news, in particular when it came to the protests on college campuses, when that was happening, how did you feel when you were watching that, knowing what some of those students were going through that they didn't ask for and they didn't sign up for at all?
I actually was looking especially at what was going on in Columbia because I went to rabbinical school. So my seminary was right across the street, the Jewish Theological Seminary, and they have a program for dual degree where college students can go to Columbia and take classes at JTS where I was. So I knew a bunch of the Jewish Columbia students, and I reached out to the head of student life over there, and they said, it's been really rough. The students have had to, stay like kind of sheltered in their shelter in place kind of in their dorms, that kind of thing. And so I offered, can we throw a pizza party? Can we send a video? Like my heart went out to those students. But at the same time, she said, the head of student life said they're so resilient. They are, so strong. They're going on with their classes. They're sticking together. It was hard. It was really hard for them and painful, but, they were resilient.
When you were watching those?
Well, I thought about it in terms of my oldest grandson, who's 17 years old, and he's starting his senior year in high school, and he's thinking about where he wants to go to college a year from now. And he wants a campus. He's been involved in Jewish activities as a teenager. He lives in Baltimore, and he wants to go to a college which has an active Jewish life. And I thought, well, what's it going to be like for him when he gets on campus? And should that be a factor in his decision making?
And you're deciding, is it worth sending my kid to a place like this if they're not going to do anything about this? And then on the other side, you want to pressure maybe the school to do something about it, depending on how you feel. When you were watching that happen, did you feel anger? Did you want to do something about it?
Anger and disgust, and I also was hopeful that somebody representing the side that was castigating the Jewish students would step forward and say, yes, Israel has a right to exist, but no one said that. There wasn't one person ever, adult, college student, high school student, across the board from that camp that would begin a diatribe with, yes, Israel has a right to exist, but ... And we're still not hearing that. That has me very concerned.
Well, would you send your kid to a school that has an active encampment and it's going to be there in the fall?
Of course not. But how do
to be honest, how you would predict which schools. I
think some schools did it last time. It's building up again. They haven't said anything about it. And so it looks like it's going to happen again at some schools.
Well, there was a lot of discussion about how much it was present in the Ivy League schools, which is interesting because there's, for better or worse, there's been a lot of Jewish presence at a lot of these schools, and there are a lot of alumni associations that are kind of up in arms. But and there was actually a really interesting article about why some of the Ivy Leagues are especially susceptible to some of the kind of anti-Zionist ideology that some of the they were sort of talking about the people who immerse themselves in PhDs and kind of in a very particular way of thinking that they can't kind of see a broader perspective that
that's what
includes
happened
Zionism.
with those presidents, the school presidents when they went to Congress.
Yeah.
They answered the questions logistically instead of kind of universally and realizing how it sounded and what was going on. They paid the price for it.
Like my former profession, practicing law. They were prepared by lawyers.
They were prepared by lawyers, but they missed the boat. They missed the boat on, that wasn't just for lawyers. That was for everybody and the perception of everybody else.
It was the court. It was a court, but it was the court of public opinion.
Exactly. Said better.
When it comes to issues like this, when it comes to issues overseas, when it comes to issues that you as a people, as being reformed, conservative, orthodox, are you guys opposing each other? Or are you guys all part of the same team in the grand scheme of things? Because you guys, it's different in certain regards. You know what I mean? Without starting any beef. You know what I mean? There's a difference, right?
I think there are divisions, but they don't fall neatly along denominational lines at all. I think that there's diversity. I do think that you get sort of a concentration of particular political beliefs in different movements, but I don't think that it falls neatly along denominations at all. But there are definitely divisions within the Jewish people. Right. And a little bit to that point, and to your question before, would you send your child to a campus that has an encampment? I would say that I would. I'm hopeful that this coming year that the administrations will be more mindful that things don't escalate into physical violence. But I really want my children to be able to feel strong enough in their identity that they can decide for themselves where as Jews they want to stand politically, and that if someone were to say something to them that's harassing, as long as it doesn't, God forbid, go into physical violence, that my child would be able, and I have two very young children right now, but that they'll have a strong enough sense of their Jewish identity not to feel completely decimated by that.
Right, that's the ideal, but let me push back a little bit. There's a lot of schools, and it's a lot of money to go to college. Are you rewarding the schools for not adjusting or handling things better if they are allowing things to get out of hand? Obviously, just protesting is protesting. It's college, that's great. But when they are preventing people from getting to class, when they have signs that are offensive and they haven't clamped down on that, are you maybe endorsing that in a sense by sending your kids there instead of somewhere else that's done a better job?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely see people voting with their feet in that sense, and it's a little while until my kid goes to college tomorrow.
But it's something to consider now.
I do think that seeing that the administration are at least going to the point of making sure kids are getting to class, that physical obstruction kind of thing isn't happening, but places where people are holding up signs and having robust debate, that I say,
that's good, but the signs can get out of control too. Signs is, I stand, with Gaza or Free Palestine. That's one thing. But, right next to them could be Hitler was right. Yeah. I've seen, the same protests, and you have different people. You can't all group protesters together either. Some are saying, we want a safe solution to this and whatever. Other people are saying, no, down with Zionism. And so even within a protest, it's tough. And as reporters, we have to be careful not to group everybody together sometimes as well.
Well, and something that's very complicating too is that we saw some of those very signs that you're talking about on January 6th.
Absolutely.
People wearing T-shirts that said Camp Auschwitz, or an abbreviation for 6 million wasn't enough.
Yep.
So
it was the Pepe the Frog, which was
right. So this is what really complicates the discussion about anti-Semitism, is that you see it on both sides of the political spectrum.
So we're going to get into politics now. I have some numbers. You guys know the stereotype. Let's start with that. Why do you think the stereotype is, and the numbers have backed this up over time, Jewish people are Democrats? Let's start over here. Why do you think?
Franklin Roosevelt.
Put it all on Franklin D?
I'm going to say that's
whole
where it
thing?
started, yeah.
But then it had to stay there.
My grandmother would have kissed the ground that well, he couldn't walk, but would have kissed the ground that he traveled.
Yeah.
She was off the boat, Lithuanian, Russian, and she knew, she just loved Franklin Roosevelt. And I think that's now, 80, 90 years ago.
It's a long time.
Well, do you agree? Because I always feel like, me especially as African American, I always feel like they believe Democrats are more for minorities. I think that's kind of gets thrust upon, and I think that gets lost. That there are brothers and sisters out there that are conservative. There are Jewish people out there that are conservative, and I think that gets lost. Someone thinks Democrat, they think, oh, they're for the minorities.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. But I think the wellspring of that was the New Deal.
So at that point it was,
Yeah.
and it's just a matter of if that tradition lived on, or if the parties are living up to it still.
So, but you also have, though, like the big waves of Jewish immigration, like especially from Europe, they were like really into labor organizing in those days, and labor was traditionally aligned with the Democratic Party. That was like in the 20s and 30s, and then
point.
later in the civil rights movement, you had a lot of Jews involved in supporting that as well. And so major movements that have become causes célèbres of the Democratic Party have had a lot of Jewish involvement,
Your
not
stuff,
exclusively.
Rabbi knows her stuff.
There are definitely conservative Jews, 100%, plenty of them, and you definitely see some moving of feet right now around Israel, which
Right.
we're going
And
to talk about. But the American causes that Jews have been aligned with have been very much, many Jews have been strongly aligned with
Great answer.
with progressive causes.
Great answer. So let's go over some numbers that I do have here. So we have just the last presidential campaign. This is 2020. Joe Biden got 68% of the Jewish vote. Donald Trump got 28% of the Jewish vote. And that's compared to on the national scale, it was about 51-49, right? So the vast majority there. So a recent poll came from Rich Barris. American Jewish voters now prefer Harris, just 53% to 46%. So that is a huge change. Now, is that just a reactionary thing? Is that, one poll? It's possible. But I want to know from you guys, are you hearing anything? Are you feeling any movement? If it's not that drastic, so be it. But what are you noticing out there with people that are talking about this, that are maybe considering a move to the other side they had not considered before? It sounds like you had a little bit of that, Rabbi. That you've seen at least some.
I have heard murmurings in the hallway outside of pro-Israel rallies that I've attended and even spoken at. I've heard people murmuring Jews for Trump and that kind of thing. So I've definitely seen it kind of bubbling at the edges, even though, like I said, we're not sort of having that conversation overtly. Right. But I've also seen the Democratic Party really try to address that head on and say the Jews for the Democratic Party messaging is here's Kamala's record and here's Tim Walz's record on Israel supporting blah, blah, blah. So you can tell that they're nervous that the narrative is not that.
Yeah,
but
point.
I think that it seems like there's reason to think.
What do you think?
Well, talk to me on November 6th.
Sure.
Because if that's the result, I would be shocked. That seems like an outlier number to me, that there would be just a seismic change of 15% in the Jewish vote in just the
4 years.
past 4 years. Yeah,
But we know something big has happened in that last year.
It could be, and certainly Israel and the war has had some effect on it. But I think, and this happens a lot in elections, people tend to come home to their natural home, as you get closer to election day. So I would be surprised if the number is not well into the 60s for the Democrats.
Well, in particular, your daughter sounds like she may have changed a little bit as well. I'm not going to put you on the spot with how she'll vote, but people like that.
She was there.
She's nervous about the vice president running for president more than she would have been 12 months ago.
It's incredible.
But I can also pretty much assure myself, my family in this room, that there's no way that she's going to vote for Mr. Trump.
But that's interesting. You just hit on something that we actually saw in our last focus group. We didn't have people saying they would vote for Trump, but we did have people saying, I'm not voting for Harris. And they had their reasons that are probably very different from what we're talking about now. But when you're, in a sense, that's half a vote, right? Because you're not voting for someone means they're not getting your vote. You're not voting for someone else, so it's not a switch of two.
Yeah.
But But a hesitation and a motivation is part of politics. And if you're not, for that topic, going to be as strong as maybe some would want, they may just stay at home. Not vote for the other person, but not support that person either.
I've always thought it was difficult to comment on things that I haven't seen. You know what I mean? You like, there are people that are there, like dealing with things, and in everything that's getting reported in the news, is a bunch of people reporting things in the news. You know, that aren't Jewish, that are not there. You know what I mean? How do you guys trust the information you're hearing? Do you have family there? Is it something that you just know because you know, or you know what I mean? How do
There's
you?
a lot of different things coming out here.
What do you believe?
My media diet has changed since October 7th. And the sources of news I get, what's going on just in Israel, I've changed. I have multiple subscriptions now.
Wow.
As opposed to just one. And that's actually been beneficial for like a more holistic view.
Real quick,
What's going on?
you did that because you didn't like the coverage? You thought it was inaccurate or incomplete?
Wasn't enough.
Wasn't enough coverage.
Incomplete.
I subscribed also to the Times of Israel,
That's fine.
and because I was looking at it for free every day, I said, you know what,
Yeah.
I should
Yeah.
pay, and it's been meaningful to get that perspective. It's been helpful to me.
How do you feel about that? You know, how do you trust the information you're getting? Because different media outlets have different agendas, whether they like to admit it or not. And you want to be able to trust the information, especially about people that you're concerned about.
Yeah. So I do have family in Israel. I have cousins there and I've lived in Israel twice, once for a year, once for 6 months. So my cousin, who's a bit older than me, who has children a bit older than mine, was very distressed afterward. The number of times the children had to go into the bomb shelter. I would say they're safe. They lived in more the centers in Tel Aviv area, but they don't feel safe because they're constantly on high alert. But in terms of like one thing that I thought was really interesting is that my mom said she talked to our cousin over there who's older, who's like in his 70s, and he thinks that that Israel has never had a better American friend president than Biden, which I really would not have expected him to say. Also, when I lived in Israel, during Trump's presidency, you would go into Jerusalem and you would see a lot of like welcome Trump kind of signs because of the moving of the embassy.
Right.
And so there was a vibe of like, oh, Trump is a really good friend to
Abraham
Israel.
Accords.
Right,
Yep.
but it's not clear that that's so anymore, especially because of the loss of favor for Bibi Netanyahu and the notion that Trump and Bibi are kind of like in cahoots, that like there's such a loss of favor for Netanyahu in Israel that they're not so sure, I think, anymore.
We're almost out of time here. I want to get to a couple other topics. This one might be a short answer. Where things are right now, you know, the common tradition is to say, you know, next year in Israel. Would you go to Israel right now?
Would I travel to Israel right now?
Would you travel to Israel?
I was there approximately 2 years ago. We took my daughter's family, our two older grandsons. Unfortunately, our oldest grandson was supposed to go on a trip this summer, and it was canceled. He's part of a Jewish youth organization. I'm not actively seeking out that opportunity now, but if someone offered me an opportunity to go to Israel and invited me to go, say, on a mission or a trip like that, yeah, I would go right now.
Okay. Would you go?
I would really like to go, and I'd like to go on a mission. I haven't been able to go since October 7th because I gave birth in December, and so it's been hard with a young baby, but I would really like to go.
Okay. Given everything, would you still go?
Yes, not next week though.
Okay. What about you?
Yeah, actually, my family and I very much would like to go. I've never been, and
Wow.
would very much like to. In our neighborhood.
Do you feel safe enough to go now? I mean, scheduled for next month, you know, let's go.
I feel safe enough. Yeah. To be honest, I do. Our neighbors just left and came back recently, and I would actually check with them first.
Absolutely.
The American carriers have discontinued.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right, because I mean, that's the directive pretty much from the government, is it's not a great time to go. And,
Yeah.
and that's got to be tough, considering all that. All right, guys, I want to thank you for your time. I think this was great. And for those folks watching on YouTube right now, this is also for you, right? So if you have some comments, put them on there. We want to see what you're thinking about this. Something struck a chord. If you want to add to the conversation and maybe answer some of these questions yourselves, please feel free to do so. And we'll get back with this group maybe in a couple months, see what's going on, what's changing. Politics is always changing, and our feelings on it might as well. So thanks for joining us on Off the Air. And so now, we're off the air.